I'm Joe Catalano with an AM Quincy news update for Wednesday, November 29th. The Quincy Salvation Army's Community Leader Kettle will be held today from 9 to 4 on the Hancock Adams Common in Quincy Center. Elected officials, business leaders, and representatives of nonprofit groups will take turns ringing the bell to help raise funds for the Salvation Army's annual holiday kettle drive. The Salvation Army says it's trying to raise a total of $100,000 from their kettle drive this season to provide food, clothing, toys, and gifts to needy families across the South Shore. The Community Leader Kettle in Quincy Center typically raises at least $10,000 every year. Quincy Mayor Thomas Koch will be ringing the bell today at noon. Father Bill's and Mainspring of Quincy served up 1,700 meals this past Thanksgiving, with many of them being served for the first time in their new Yawkey Housing Resource Center in Quincy. 120 volunteers helped serve meals in person in Quincy and Brockton, and also delivered more than 1,100 pre-packaged meals to individuals and families across the region. Donations to a special Thanksgiving fund allowed Father Bill's and Mainspring to meet this year's added costs. This year's pie donors included the Easton Knights of Columbus, the Boston Bruins Foundation, Table Talk Pies, and the third graders at the East Elementary School in Hingham. The new Yawkey Housing Resource Center on Broad Street opened earlier this month and will replace the former Father Bill's shelter across the street. In addition to an emergency shelter, the Yawkey Center provides day services, medical services, recreational activities, and also has 30 permanent housing units. Controversial Massachusetts blogger Aidan Kearney, who is known as Turtle Boy, will face additional charges of conspiracy, according to a special prosecutor. Kearney was arrested and charged in October with 1 count of conspiracy and 8 counts of intimidation of a witness, juror, police, or court official. He returned to Stoughton District Court yesterday for a motion hearing in which his attorney was seeking the return of phones and computers that were seized during a search of Kearney's home. His attorney argued those devices are the tools of his trade and that the prosecution would be adequately served to save copies of the data while returning the devices. Kearney's attorney argued that the devices may include privileged legal communications and information from confidential sources and even police sources. Kearney has blogged prolifically in recent months about the murder case against Karen Reed. The Mansfield woman is accused of hitting John O'Keefe, a Boston police officer, with her vehicle outside of a home in Canton in January of 2022. Prosecutors say Reed and O'Keefe had both been drinking that night. Reed and her defense team claim that she is a victim of a cover-up. Massachusetts has more than 1,500 miles of coastline across 78 communities that count nearly 2.5 million people as residents. And the Healey administration yesterday mapped out the skeleton of its strategy for preparing those areas to deal with the impacts of a changing climate. The Resilient Coasts Initiative will be led by a new Chief Coastal Resilience Officer within the Office of Coastal Zone Management and is expected to pursue a multi-pronged approach to identify regulatory, policy, and funding mechanisms to develop focused long-term solutions to coastal climate change risks. Next year, the Resilience Coasts effort will divide the coastline into coastal resilience districts to group places that share similar landscape characteristics and face similar hazards. And then based on those districts, the state plans to collaborate with communities to implement tailored resilience policy and regulatory strategies, including nature-based solutions, dredging, coastal nourishment, roadway elevation, and managed retreat. Activists on both sides of the gun debate testified at the State House yesterday as lawmakers worked to hammer out a final package of proposed changes to the state's firearms laws. One of the bills would ban ghost guns, which typically guns that lack serial numbers are largely untraceable and can be constructed at home, sometimes with a 3D printer. Other proposals would tighten the state's ban on certain semi-automatic weapons, such as AR and AK-style guns, and clarify places where carrying a firearm is prohibited, like schools, polling places, and government buildings. Last month, the House approved a sweeping gun bill aimed at tightening firearm laws, cracking down on ghost guns, and strengthening the state's ban on certain weapons. The Senate has yet to approve its own gun bill. The House bill would also prohibit individuals from carrying a gun into a person's home without their permission, and require key gun components be serialized and registered with the state. It would also ban carrying firearms in schools, polling places, and government buildings. The bill is in part a response to a 2022 U.S. Supreme Court ruling that U.S. citizens have a right to carry firearms in public for self-defense. Earlier this month, Attorney General Andrea Campbell announced a gun violence prevention unit dedicated in part to defending the state's existing gun laws from legal challenges. Advocates and lawmakers are pushing for more government funding for families and child care providers in Massachusetts, warning that without it, child care centers could close and the cost for families could increase. Pandemic-era grants from the federal government ran out in September, so Massachusetts spent $475 million to keep what's called C3 grants going directly to providers through the end of the fiscal year. Advocates say child care centers can't pay high enough salaries to retain their staff without passing the cost on to families who are already paying upwards of $30,000 for tuition. Now, advocates are calling on the government to offer financial assistance permanently, both for parents and providers. Lawmakers on Beacon Hill are considering proposals to do just that. Senator Jason Lewis filed legislation that would not only make those grants for providers permanent, but also expand financial assistance to include both the lowest and middle-income families. The clock is ticking for lawmakers on Beacon Hill to find compromise on a nearly $3 billion supplemental budget bill. After failing to reach an agreement by November 15th, the legislature is now in informal session, creating an even more difficult lift for Democrats in the majority. Stuck in the middle is $250 million in migrant shelter funding. The Senate bill gives the Healey administration more leeway. The House bill wants more oversight on that spending. Healey is hopeful for resolution on a budget and emergency shelter funding this week. Meantime, pre-negotiated wage increases for union workers and disaster relief can't move forward without a final agreement, adding to the overall urgency for lawmakers as a January 2nd deadline. If they can't find agreement by that date, both bills would be scrapped, and the entire process would have to start from scratch. Check of business news this morning. Stocks bounced back yesterday. The Dow was up 83 points. The Nasdaq rose 40, and the S&P added 4. Asian stocks mostly fell, although a strong report on U.S. consumer confidence and hopes that the Fed is finished with its aggressive interest rate hikes sent shares higher on Wall Street. The dollar fell. The euro rose. Oil at $76 a barrel. Sports: Celtics beat Chicago 124-97. The National Weather Service forecast. For today, mostly sunny and cool with highs only in the upper 30s. Tonight, clear, low 26. Tomorrow, mostly sunny, a bit milder, and a high of 46. Some afternoon showers possible Friday, but a high Friday, 51 degrees, and then some afternoon showers Saturday with a high of 47. The marine forecast today calling for 2-foot waves, west winds 10 to 15, gusting to 20 knots at times. High tide 12:18 p.m. Sunrise at 6:50, sets at 4:13. Traffic note: Fore River Bridge is scheduled to open at 2 p.m. I'm Joe Catalano with an AM Quincy news update for Wednesday, November 29th.